Welcome to Spelling Bee Ninja, where we empower students with the knowledge they need to succeed. Subscribe now for free educational content designed to make learning engaging and enjoyable. Today, we're diving into a vital economic concept that impacts everyone: inflation and its relationship with purchasing power. Understanding these concepts is crucial for making informed financial decisions and navigating the world of economics effectively. Let's start by understanding what inflation is. Inflation is the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services rises over time. This increase in prices means that the purchasing power of money, the amount of goods and services you can buy with a specific amount of currency, decreases. For example, if you could buy 10 apples for $1 last year, this year you might only be able to buy 9. This gradual rise in prices affects everyone, from consumers to businesses and investors. Knowing how inflation works is essential for making smart financial choices. Now, what causes inflation? There are several factors at play. One common cause is demand pull inflation, which occurs when the demand for goods exceeds the economy's ability to produce them. Picture a booming economy where everyone suddenly has more money to spend. This increase in demand can lead to higher prices. Another reason is cost push inflation, which happens when the costs of production increase. Companies may face rising energy costs or higher wages, and they typically pass these costs on to consumers, resulting in higher prices for goods and services. Built-in inflation occurs when workers demand higher wages to keep up with the increasing cost of living, which businesses then offset by raising prices. Lastly, we have monetary inflation, which happens when there's more money circulating in the economy than can be matched by economic growth. This often results from government policies that increase the money supply too quickly. Understanding these causes helps us tackle inflation effectively, whether through policy changes or personal financial decisions. Next, let's discuss how inflation is measured. The most widely used measure is the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. The CPI tracks the prices of a representative basket of goods and services typically purchased by households. This basket includes essentials like food, housing, transportation, healthcare, and education. To calculate inflation, economists track these prices over time and determine the percentage change. Another measure you might hear about is core inflation, which excludes volatile items like food and energy prices to offer a clearer picture of underlying inflation trends. The Producer Price Index, or PPI, measures wholesale prices, while the GDP deflator captures price changes across the entire economy. Knowing how inflation is measured helps us understand news about economic conditions and the overall health of our economy. Now, how does inflation affect savers and consumers? Inflation can be quite challenging for those who save. If you have money sitting in a savings account and the inflation rate is higher than the interest you earn, you're losing purchasing power. For instance, if inflation is 3% and your account only earns 1% interest, you're effectively losing 2% of your purchasing power every year. This is why simply keeping cash at home isn't a great strategy. For consumers, inflation means needing more money to buy the same things over time, which can be frustrating. Interestingly, there's some relief for borrowers because inflation reduces the real value of debt. When you borrow money, you repay it in the future with dollars that are worth less than when you borrowed them. This can be especially tricky for retirees who rely on a fixed income, as they become more vulnerable if their income doesn't rise alongside prices. Understanding these effects helps us realize why it's critical to choose savings options and investment strategies that can keep up with or outpace inflation. It's also essential to grasp the difference between nominal interest rates and real interest rates. Nominal interest rates are the rates you see on loans or savings accounts without considering inflation. In contrast, real interest rates adjust for inflation, giving you a more accurate picture of your earnings or costs. For example, if a savings account offers a nominal interest rate of 4%, but inflation is at 3%, your actual return is only 1%. This distinction is crucial when evaluating the true cost of loans or the return on savings. We must consider the hidden impact of inflation. Now, let's consider the winners and losers from inflation in our economy. Borrowers are typically winners because they repay their loans with money that loses value over time. Similarly, people who own assets like property often benefit since the value of these real assets usually rises with inflation. Workers who negotiate wage increases that match inflation also gain a more comfortable financial standing. On the flip side, savers and those on fixed incomes, like retirees, tend to be the losers, as their purchasing power diminishes. Another group that suffers are workers whose wages do not increase at the same rate as inflation. They find it increasingly challenging to make ends meet. Understanding these dynamics is vital as it shows how inflation acts as a silent force, redistributing wealth from savers to borrowers and impacting various groups differently. Central banks play a significant role in controlling inflation. Utilizing monetary policy, these institutions manage the money supply and interest rates to regulate economic activity. When inflation rises too high, central banks may increase interest rates to slow down spending and cool off the economy. Conversely, if inflation dips too low, they may lower rates to encourage borrowing and stimulate the economy. Central banks often have specific inflation targets, aiming for a rate around 2% to maintain a stable economic environment. This balancing act is delicate. Raise rates too much, and we risk causing a recession; raise them too little, and inflation can persist. Understanding the role of central banks helps us see how these policy decisions impact our daily lives. Now, let's touch on its counterpart, deflation, which is a drop in the general price level. While lower prices may sound good, deflation can trigger severe economic consequences. For example, when prices fall, consumers often delay purchases, hoping for even lower prices, which then reduces demand. This reduction leads businesses to cut production and lay off workers, creating a cycle that can spiral downwards. Another issue with deflation is that it makes debts more burdensome. Borrowers end up repaying loans with money that's worth more than what they borrowed. A historical example is Japan's lost decades, where deflation severely stunted economic growth. Central banks fear deflation more than moderate inflation because it is much harder to combat and can lead to prolonged periods of stagnation. This highlights why moderate inflation is still perceived as a manageable condition for the health of an economy. Finally, while we might not control inflation directly, there are ways we can protect ourselves against it. One strategy is to invest in assets that typically outpace inflation, such as stocks or real estate, which can both appreciate in value over time. Additionally, inflation-protected securities, like Treasury inflation-protected securities, adjust their payments with inflation to safeguard your investment. Commodities and precious metals tend to hold their value during inflationary periods as well. On a practical level, it's wise to keep savings in high-yield accounts that at least meet or exceed inflation rates. Investing in your skills and education can also be beneficial, as this helps ensure that your income grows in proportion to inflation, ultimately protecting your purchasing power. Diversifying your investment portfolio is essential too, as different assets react variably to inflationary pressures. With this knowledge, you can take proactive steps to safeguard your financial future. As we wrap up, we've explored inflation and its relationship with purchasing power. We covered what inflation is, its causes, how it is measured, and how it affects different groups, including savers and consumers. Understanding the difference between real and nominal interest rates, recognizing the winners and losers of inflation, and examining the role of central banks helps us grasp this complex subject more clearly. We also touched upon the dangers of deflation and practical strategies to protect ourselves from inflation's impact. Remember, a moderate inflation rate encourages spending and investment while preventing the more significant risks associated with deflation. The insights gained from understanding inflation can empower you to make better financial choices and safeguard your economic well-being. In summary, we've uncovered the essence of inflation and purchasing power, touching on its definition, the various causes and measurements, and its implications for different stakeholders in the economy. We've seen how inflation can benefit borrowers and asset owners while disadvantaging savers and those with fixed incomes. Central banks play a crucial role in managing inflation through monetary policy, balancing the economy's needs against the risk of inflation or deflation. Lastly, we've introduced strategies to mitigate inflation's effects and invest wisely for the future. This topic is not just theoretical, it directly impacts our daily lives and financial decisions. Thank you for joining us today on Spelling Bee Ninja. We hope you found this discussion on inflation and purchasing power enlightening. Remember, understanding these economic concepts can lead to better financial decisions that positively affect your life. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe for more educational content and share it with friends and family who might benefit. Stay curious and empowered, and we'll see you next time.